There's an old saying that movement without suppression is suicide and that suppression without movement is a waste of ammo. So let's explore that concept in this little vignette I set up. Naturally, when a gunfight breaks out, everybody tends to drop, go to cover. So we have our enemy hold up behind heavy log cover and then friendlies behind a heavy armored vehicle, both of which are behind cover. And naturally, when this happens, sectors of fire are pretty much going to be on top of each other. We're shooting at them, they're shooting at us, and if anybody tries to maneuver and go outside of their cover, they're going to die. That is why we say that movement without suppression is suicide. So what we can do, however, is try and get fire superiority via suppression. Fire superiority is when you have more rounds coming out than are coming in, and if the enemy is fully suppressed with our heavy fire, where we're essentially just mag dumping, going cyclic, trying to just keep their heads down, eventually they will be unable to shoot back. And they are basically going to be fighting for their life, just trying to stay behind cover so that they don't get shot in the face. This is very ammunition intensive. This is not something you can do for very long. And this is why we say that suppression without maneuver is a waste of ammo, because you cannot sustain heavy suppression indefinitely. You'll run out of ammo and you'll run out of time if something else is going on. So once you have this suppression set up, you are then going to go to the maneuver, where you send some guys over and they are going to flank all the way around, and they can do this because we have suppressed the enemy. They are not able to get rounds out at you, so they're going to be keeping their heads down. This is your opportunity to bound these guys over here, and suddenly when they get to a certain point, they will be able to bypass that cover, so their sector of fire is going to be right on top of them, and they will be able to easily destroy the enemy with that. And then they can assault through and do whatever battle drill you want to do. But that's the fundamental game of angles that we're playing with suppression and maneuver. So to recap, do not move until you have suppression. Once you have suppression, start maneuvering. We've talked about how important it is to suppress the enemy before we try to move anywhere. But what does that actually look like? What does that mean? Well, suppression is very much a psychological effect that we are applying to our enemy. It is when the enemy believes that they are about to get shot if they stick their head up out of their cover. So there are different ways that we can achieve it. Naturally, we need to get our fire to be as accurate as possible to get maximum suppression. And we can actually get higher suppression with fewer rounds if those rounds are more accurate. So when we're targeting them, we should be targeting their actual position. Just blind firing over the berm is not going to be nearly as suppressive as layering precise shots into their firing positions. But when we're shooting at them, if we have our impact going low, that is probably going to be the least effective. The terrain is going to absorb the effects of the round, and it's not going to sound as intimidating to them. It's not going to destroy their cover or anything. Whereas if we target their center area with their actual fighting position, get the rounds right on target, that is extremely effective because it's going to degrade their cover. It's going to be right in their face. And if it's not going to actually injure them, it will make them rightfully believe that we are actually targeting their actual position. They specifically, individually are in danger. Then the last, if we have high impact, if the rounds are going over their head, that is less effective than if we've got impact right on the center, but that is more desirable because you still get that significant ballistic crack as the bullet breaks the sound barrier over their head. That is going to create a very intense psychological effect, and they know that they are going to be targeted, even if the rounds are not right in their face. So make sure that when you're actually applying your suppression, those rounds need to be as accurate as possible, and it's better to be high than it is to be low. We've been talking a lot about how important it is to lay down heavy suppressive fire to facilitate maneuver, but it's also important to not waste ammunition, and there is such a thing as over-suppression, which we're going to talk about today. So this little scenario I set up is very simple. We have a fire team and a single enemy soldier. He's hiding behind a tree, and he is heavily suppressed. We've got heavy fire coming in on them, and these guys are maneuvering around. Naturally, this is a very easy fight because as soon as they get a little bit over it, they'll be target the threat and eliminate him. But we have to be cognizant about what we're actually doing with our ammunition, because if these guys are just mag dumping and mag dumping and mag dumping on a single target, what happens when his buddies come up and suddenly you're in a fight against an evenly matched fire team? You're going to be in a lot of trouble. So what this looks like in the bad scenario is, like I said, initial contact rate of fire goes up and it stays constant, and these guys are just mag dumping into hard cover and not getting anything done. They're just keeping his head down. Eventually, yes, it will work. These guys will be able to maneuver, he will be able to be eliminated, and the rate of fire will drop as ceasefire is called. But a better way to do it is to have the unit leader drive a more sustained rate of fire. So same thing, we get initial fire superiority after contact, but then as these guys are maneuvering, we drop down to a more sustained rate of fire. And this may be, in this case, just a single shot every few seconds, just to remind him that he can't move, just to remind him that he has to keep his head down. Bang, 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 as these guys are going around. And then when they get into a more assault position and they're maybe more exposed, they can get that rate of fire back up so they can get real close and be able to eliminate the target. Then they can call ceasefire from there and bring it back down. This saves so much ammunition for these guys so that they can actually retain that firepower for when they actually need it. It's important to not blast through all your ammunition on a single target because you never know what's around the corner. Or if this maneuver element takes longer to get there, what happens with it all of a sudden everybody's running black on ammo and these guys are ready to assault and you don't have enough ammunition to actually facilitate their assault, so he's able to then stick his head up, turn around, and shoot these guys in the face as they try and flank him. We've talked a lot about how suppression can be used to get an advantage in a fight, but these techniques are not secret. The enemy knows how to use suppression as well. So they are definitely going to try and suppress you. And if they get suppression, they're going to try and maneuver, just like you would. And so when we get suppressed, when we find ourselves in a position where they have fire superiority and we cannot maneuver, then we need to figure out what we're going to do. And there's really three main options. First is that we can regain fire superiority. Maybe we have a bunch of grenades, grenade launchers, we have heavy machine guns, we have some air assets. We have something that can knock their heads down for a minute to get fire superiority and turn the tables on them. But in this case, we're outnumbered over 2-1. That's not going to work. So really what needs to be thought about as the leader over here is we need to start withdrawing. Maybe you want to pop smoke and start bounding back as best you can. Naturally, that comes with risks because if you are not able to fully obscure yourself, if you don't have good cover and concealment going backwards, you may be exposing yourself to enemy fire. But if the alternative is these guys coming up on top of you and going down the line and shooting you all in the face, that may be still a preferable option than just sitting there and waiting to die. Now, with that said, there is a third option, and this one is heavily starred because you don't always want to do it. But there are some instances where you want to maintain the fight. If these guys are not able to maneuver, maybe the terrain won't allow it, or maybe these guys, maybe they're insurgents, they don't have formal training, and they're just kind of sitting on a hilltop far away from you, just mag dumping into you, and you're behind really good cover, there may be an advantage to just letting them shoot. Let them burn their ammo, let them expend their resources, learn more about them, and then you can wait for other assets to get online, wait for friendlies to get over, and then you can start regain fire superiority and maneuver, stuff like that. But you really need to know your terrain. You really need to know the enemy. Sometimes you may know where they're going to flank from. You may be observing these guys are flanking through, but you know that as soon as they get to a certain point, they're not going to be able to assault. And this guy over here can watch the flank and just mow down anybody that comes in. That may be a situation in which you want them to flank. Let them flank. And you have such a good defensive position that you know they're not going to be able to do anything. So you're okay with being suppressed in this vicinity as long as you can shoot and have good fields of fire in a different direction. But you really, really need to be careful because if you're wrong about this, suddenly they may be able to suppress and start bounding forward, and then you're going to fight for your life in a 10-foot fight. And that is not a fun situation to be in. So be very mindful of the terrain, the enemy, your capabilities, what assets you have, so that this doesn't turn into a bloodbath on your end. Talking guns is a really nifty technique that can help you maintain heavy suppression on an enemy without burning through your ammunition at an unsustainable rate. So what happens generally is you get online, you put down heavy fire, you're suppressing the enemy, and these guys need to flank. But this is going to be a long flank. It's going to take them a while to get into position. So you need to reduce your ammo expenditure. So what happens is the squad leader, team leader, whoever, initiates talking guns. And what that means is that one gun team ceases fire. So these guys start shooting, and they put down a heavy fat burst on the target, and then they cease fire. And then these guys pick up, and they do a heavy long burst on the target. And then they cease fire. And then they put down a heavy burst. And it just goes back and forth, so that you essentially cut your ammo expenditure in half just by taking turns back and forth. But from the perspective of the enemy, they're just getting heavy burst after heavy burst after heavy burst. It feels to them like you're going cyclic on them. So with that, you can really cut down your ammo expenditure and make sure that you have really heavy suppression, but you can save your ammo for the next fight. Now, naturally, this technique works best with heavy machine guns. You can scale it up or down with other weapon systems naturally, but it also has to be practiced. So make sure you go out, practice with your team, make sure people know what talking guns actually means.